What's up, everybody? Welcome to week 3 of the Upside Down. So, we've talked about how sin has corrupted our world and has turned it into an upside-down kingdom, right? Where things don't make sense anymore, where truth is disguised and it's darkened and it looks like something other than what it is. And last week, we went through the Beatitudes. We went through the teachings of Jesus where he tells us who the blessed are. And some of those teachings may have sounded a little off if we listen with upside down ears. But Jesus is giving us the proper targets to shoot at, right? He's recalibrating our aim. And we've talked about in Romans 12:12 how Paul has encouraged us to not conform to the patterns of this world, but be transformed by the renewing of our minds. Why? So we can know what God's will is, right? His good, his pleasing, his perfect will for us. So this week we're going to continue walking through Matthew 5. And we're going to go through a set of teachings where Jesus takes a concept that the people have heard before. That's pretty familiar, that everyone sort of agrees on. And he says, this is what you think. But it's actually something more than this, right? So in this section, we're going to hear the phrase, you have heard it that it was said, but I tell you. Okay? So in one of these teachings, Jesus begins to talk about murder. Okay? So murder, generally speaking, is something we all agree that it's frowned upon, right? Sort of evil to murder someone. Well, if we trace this back to the ancient days, right? There was a time when lawlessness and murder were rampant. And God speaks to his people, the Israelites, and he says, hey, we're going to be a people. You are going to be people who are set apart. You're going to be different than the culture. And for that reason, you have to follow these certain kinds of behaviors. One, because it's righteous. Two, because it'll draw a contrast between my people, God's people, and the rest of the world. So one of these laws is, well, don't murder, right? So Jesus picks up with this in Matthew 5, and he says, you have heard it said to the people long ago, you shall not murder, and anyone who murders will be subject to judgment, right? This is familiar. People nod, people agree, right? Murder deserves judgment. And he says, but I tell you that anyone who is angry with a brother or sister will be subject to judgment. So Jesus is taking murder and saying, hey, if you're angry with a brother or sister, it's the same thing, right? We're not talking a just kind of anger. We actually see Jesus have a righteous, just anger in the Bible when he's cleaning out the temple because people have come in and defiled it, right? So the anger we're talking about is the selfish, vengeful, prideful kind of anger that often is really what sparks up in our hearts. And Jesus says, yeah, if you feel that kind of anger towards somebody, that's the same as murder, and it deserves judgment in the same way. You can imagine the crowd probably got a little bit quiet after that, right? He goes on next to talk about vengeance and getting even with people, right? Well, there's this concept of escalating retaliation, right? Starts off with, you poke me in the eye, so I pop you in the face, right? Well, then, you skewer me with a spear and I die, and then my family goes and wipes out your family. Well, then your tribe comes and destroys my tribe, right? And we see the violence just escalates. So the policy that we see the ancient Israelites adopt is this policy of an eye for an eye, tooth for a tooth, okay? Meaning that your response should befit the event that happened to you. So Jesus says, you have heard that it was said, eye for eye and tooth for tooth, right? Fitting consequences and punishments for the provocations that happened. But then Jesus adds, but I tell you, do not resist an evil person. If anyone slaps you on the right cheek, turn to them the other cheek as well. And if anyone wants to sue you and take your shirt, hand over your coat as well. That's a fascinating concept, right? That is not upside down logic. That is not the world we live in, right? If someone takes your shirt, you take it back. Huh? That's not what Jesus says. Here's my coat. Be well. Enjoy it. Next, we look at the concept of love and hate. Okay? So, in a world of lawlessness, where murder's rampant, where you look out for yourself, maybe your family only, right? Jesus says to love your neighbor. Well, this is a bit of a departure from how most people treat each other, right? But it's starting with your family, loving them well. But everyone outside of that, they're strangers. Don't trust them. Don't care for them. Okay? So, when Jesus says, you have heard that it was said, love your neighbor and hate your enemy. This is familiar to people. They get it. They're like, yeah, man, that's what we've been taught our whole lives. And then Jesus changes it around. He says, but I tell you, love your enemies and pray for those who persecute you. If you love those who love you, what are you doing more than others? Do not even pagans do that? So Jesus takes this concept of loving people, looking for the benefit and thriving of people who aren't yourself. And he says it doesn't just apply to your family. It doesn't just apply to your neighbor. We're going to push this even further out, and we're going to say it applies to your enemies. Whoa, but my enemies are trying to hurt me. They don't like me. They don't treat me well. They say mean things about me. They undercut me. They mock me. They make fun of me. They don't include me. And Jesus says, yep. And your response is to love them. Because guess what? It's easy to love someone who loves you. It's easy to be nice to someone who's nice to you. What's different, what shows that we, the children of God, are not like the upside down world around us, is when we love the people who do not love us. That's special. That's different. In essence, what we're called to do is to not take our cues from the upside down world, right? To not look at them and try to blend in to that environment. What Jesus calls us to do is to set our behavior according to his standards, which will draw a clean and clear contrast between how the world behaves and how we behave. We have a higher calling to be, more than just like better than the world or whatever that means, right? If we go back to archery and what target we're shooting at, we're pursuing God's will, right? Maybe another way of saying that is we are trying to imitate God. The word Christians originally was a mocking word, right? Little Christs. Oh, haha, look at you, little Christ. Look at you acting like Jesus, right? But we've kind of taken that as a badge of honor. We've kind of taken that as our calling. That's what we're pursuing. Yeah, that's what I'm trying to be. I'm trying to be a little Christ. And Christ lived a very specific, certain way, as we see from his teachings in Matthew 5. And that's what we're trying to do as well. Jesus is always showing us a better way. Should we complain? No, rejoice. Take for ourselves or give to others. Seek vengeance or choose forgiveness. Strike out in anger or offer an olive branch. Should we quit when it's hard or do we keep going? Should we gossip or speak life? Take offense or assume the best in others? These are the questions we got to ask ourselves as we try to honor Christ, as we try to live like Christ, and as we try to escape the culture and the customs of the upside down. That's it for this week. Next week, we're going to hear the story of a woman who had to live out a hard reality. And late in life, she had to face a very difficult choice of whether or not she would live according to how the world lives, or she would step into the message and the hope and the forgiveness that Jesus calls us to offer. We'll see you then.